All right. Hello and good afternoon or good evening, everybody. I hope that all of you are having a pretty good end of your weekday coming into the weekend. So glad of you all to stop by. I know that today's stream is a little more impromptu than usual, but this has sort of been a stream sort of long time coming. And I mean this in all the positive ways possible, not in any way, shape, or form to be negative or to disparage my colleagues. I would not be here without them. But as we all tune in and get things settled for the evening, um, simply just say hello and see usual names and faces in chat. Fantastic. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. So I'll start with more or less the plan for tonight. As the topic of the stream indicates, it's a subject in regarding three major areas: maturity, mentorship, and meaning. Although meaning could easily be translated or switched over for movements. After all, we are sort of all over the place in regards to what we wish to accomplish, some more locally, some more nationally, and not to mention many of my colleagues and much of my audience is not even in the United States of America, so I thought that meaning or movements can be moved over. But the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion, in part because I didn't want to write it out on Substack, I thought it'd be more important to get feedback and comments on the channel with much larger following. But I wrote down a series of five or six points as to what sort of inspired this, and you can kind of get a guess of where I'm going from here based upon these points. The first one was sort of this sort of flash in the pan, linchpin kind of moment. I think that there needs to be a discussion over regards to the reactions to what happened yesterday when regards to the passing and the repose of the Queen of England. You could kind of tell just that the viciousness had really came out full on based on our preconceived notions of the nation. I mean, I'm an American. I don't have the same. Most of America has a sort of gossipy, People magazine style interest in the royal family. It's not the cultural and government touchstone that it is, and within the British Empire and within the British Isles. But just to see how everyone reacted to sort of this great moment within sort of the end of a connecting legacy, I thought Tucker Carlson's monologue was very perfect in that regard. To say that her reign has been perfect would be obviously to lie. I think that you can turn into apostolic majesty for that. But the way that a lot of people reacted, I think, to me was a very good indicator to have this discussion. And I think so as well. The second one, of course, was the recent thread a few weeks back from Pedro Gonzalez about the dissident right, or the DR, getting some attention in the United States and other places in Europe and other right-leaning parties and institutions across the world. And this idea for self-iteration and where it goes next, and this idea of constantly being on the sidelines. That I am writing a follow-up to, but I think that some of those points can easily be addressed here. The second one is that just sort of coming up on 2 years of doing this stuff on the internet as the Prudentialist, and I think that there's a lot of reflection as well that I think is definitely worth discussing, just looking back on my own time and discussing who I've met and who I've interacted with. And then the other one has been this theme that I've been going on throughout 2022 about the need for us to set a proper example, not just to our audiences, but as ourselves. I mean, I really liked the term that Frody, from Guide to Culture has about Nationalist Narnia, that oftentimes things can be seen online as a form of escapism that can detract or suck away energy from doing any meaningful aspect on the ground. This was a big part of my speech in the 2022 February Sealings event here in the United States about being digitally deracinated and how we can translate some of the discourse and the movements that we have online into the real world. And then the last point was this Substack post from Charlemagne, which I'll probably read a few portions today. So I think that there's quite a bit for us to talk about. But the point is that I want to go on today is primarily in a short little impromptu talk. I do have some notes, is to focus on the three areas that I have in the title. So maturity, mentorship, and meaning. And with that, I think we'll just get started into the first point, which is maturity, something that even myself needs to work on. So, I think it would be very obvious to say that the online e-right space does have some issues with regard to maturity and how we grow and develop ourselves as an online movement and people that create content. The problem with, of course, things being online is that, especially with the veil of anonymity, you do have the problem that comes in with um, who you want to be and what you want to be online, which means, you can be anything that you want to be, really, whether it's a frog like I can sometimes, or various people using anime profile pictures and things like that. Not to say that that is a problem, but it does come with sort of the territory of the transgressive nature, I think, of when it comes to being on the internet, because it can be quite easy to enjoy various forms of what we like to talk about, or some of the more illicit or naughty subjects that come out here. And I'm going to share my screen real quick, because one of the people that had said a lot of what's been on my mind in terms of maturity has been Charlemagne. And I'm going to just share my screen on here for you guys. So, this is a title called The Real Dilemma of the Dissident Right, called Reaching the Right Audience. And I'll just get to one of the bigger points. He does quote a bit from Millennial Woes, which I think is also important here. And I'll read a little bit from Woes, and then we'll get to Charlemagne's main point. But I thought that this post deserved greater attention. I know that Millennial Woes does a lot on his Telegram channel and Odyssey. Grandma Woes, his streams on Monday are pretty good. But I do like this point here where Woes says, he has never spread rumors about me, tried to sabotage me, or encourage others to disavow me. He has got on with his work, and I have got on with mine. So when he is publicly attacked by the establishment, why should I not defend him? Because he is not perfect? Well, are we in a position to make perfect the enemy of the good? Do we have that luxury? The answer is no, we do not. Apparently, this needs to be spelled out for some people. Woes says that he's not immaculate, he's got a past, and his ego and dredge up to explain these things and why I'm not an ideological purist. And I like this line the most from what Woes says, is I'm not an ideological purist because I have a sense of proportion and realism. And we'll get back to that realism point in just a minute here. But I'll get to what Charlemagne really had said here, and this is the crux of it. Charlemagne says that the dissident right has a real problem, and that the problem is that people who follow and fund us are the people whom we actually want to reach. Oh, the people who fund and follow us and the people whom we actually want to reach are basically two entirely different audiences. And the audience that we are connected to is filled with too many people of dismal character whom most of us otherwise want nothing to do with. Like Mr. Woes, I'm no exemplar myself, but damn, some of you are seriously effed up. Perhaps consider this post an open letter to those of you who aren't. The problem we need to overcome is the gap between our current audience and the mainstream audience. Think what you may of Curtis Yarvin, but he's proactively closing that gap. Pedro has also made some achievements. Additionally, IRL events have been happening with increasing frequency to close this gap as well. They, at the very least, select for pro-social people who can make inroads with normal people out there. And I think that brings me to the main point that I did want to bring up as well. Yes, Charlemagne, I'm reading your blog because it was very good. That's why you were partially inspiration for this. And yes, Chancellor Chieftain, there will be a discussion of that as well on the maturity point. This is not to disparage the audience that I have. I like to think that if you're following me and a majority of us in these circles, that odds are you are pretty pro-social. Charlemagne and I have had the pleasure to meet in person at various events earlier this year in February. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of my patrons and fellow subscribers and fans, which is a great pleasure. And I think that matters a lot, because if we're going to make any sort of inroads into getting either elites or individuals that are wanting to fund us or to have areas of interest, you need to be pro-social and you need to have a certain degree of maturity. And this is actually something that American Krogan had pointed out, that, sometimes the way that we act ourselves, we kind of fall into our own poison pill of irony. There's no point in us sort of posting the happy merchant meme when clearly there are better ways to articulate those kind of issues when it comes to all sorts of dealings. And with that, I think that maturity does matter. Lord knows I'm not perfect within this. I have deleted more tweets and Telegram posts than I'd like, knowing that, one, I show my face. Two, I've interacted with some of those mainstream people. and 3, just simply because it's not adding to the discourse. I'm either getting too angry too quickly, or I'm simply shitposting for the desire to shitpost, which is always sort of I think, a challenge when sometimes you do want to make a joke or just to quip at things, but at the same time, you do have to understand who you're talking to or what your goals are to talk to. And it was sort of a wake up call to me a couple of months ago when I had that discussion with Jeremy Carl from the Claremont Institute. The only reason why that conversation even happened is because somehow someone had notified me, and I didn't even get the notification on Twitter, that I had been tagged in a tweet of his thanking him for his partial or inspiration in his response to Curtis Yarvin's "You Can Only Lose the Culture War." And it sort of was a realization to me that my scale or reach or audience had certainly was much larger than I had originally thought. And so it was sort of a wake up call in regards to maturity, because they do read a lot of the work that we do. Lord knows that Tucker Carlson has guys, and I can actually confirm that, but I won't name names or anything, that they certainly do follow these spheres. And I think that does require us to have a pro-social attitude as well. We do need individuals that are not going to be simply happily enjoying themselves, making the most insane racist diatribes on Twitter. Not to say that there is not a reason or cause to be transgressive and to push the envelope. One of the things that I wrote about a few weeks ago, or the other week, is the need to continue to push the envelope further to the right. Because if there is one thing that a lot of the establishment types do not have the capability to understand, or understand and refuse to acknowledge and go forward on it, is that they never go far enough to actually do anything about it. And this is why I think you do need to have mature, pro-social people that aren't willing to, act in a certain form or frame where it's constantly impulsive, it's knee-jerk reactions. We are in a position where I think we do need to have a little more nuance to those kind of points, and in a way and form that does put us in a position, I think, to at least be heard, or at the very least be organized in such a way to ourselves where we're not being reliant on individuals that are in this for the money, for the clout, for the book deals. That way we can be heard. This isn't to denigrate people that I've interacted with online or those from those establishments, but when you have individuals that are getting published from the American Mind that donated to Bernie Sanders in the 2020 campaign, it does raise some significant questions as to what is going on. At least when it comes to those establishment figures. Or at the very least, when I'm seeing individuals call out some forms of the American New Right, especially those that are concerned about my country, and they're being called like the John Birch Society in the same way that the National Review and those of William F. Buckley decried the John Birch Society in the 1960s. I'm certainly concerned that I'm watching history repeat itself, or that time is a flat circle. So that definitely comes to mind in my regard. And that also is a call out for myself as well. Lord knows I've been impulsive. Lord knows I have definitely said things that if I could take back, I probably would at least take it back in a way that I could flush it out better rather than just doing it for the shitpost or anything like that. And that comes to a part of sort of like Narnia nationalism or digital escapism is that one of the things about being on the internet is that we're all attached to these electronic Skinner boxes at all times, because if you're an online profile, or if you'd like to follow people, even if you're just someone in the chat or in the audience, or if you're someone like me that makes content on a regular basis and tries to write and tries to do things analytically about how we can go from here, it becomes important that you don't fall into escapism. I know that my audience ranges from people who are in community college, who are like 19, to where I have much older gentlemen that are following and commenting on what I do, which I always find to be bizarre. I'm 26 years old. There are people like twice my age listening and reading to me. But it does illustrate the need, I think, for us to not just look at this as a form of escapism, because clearly, as our friend Morgoth has once said, you do have to pay attention to what goes on outside your window. And I think that matters a lot, especially when it comes to the times that we're seeing. And again, this was reason why the recent repose of Queen Elizabeth II was an inspiration for this discussion. Because to me, I thought, when people are pointing out who really has the ties to the monarchy, and it's native Britons, and everyone else is jeering and laughing and enjoying the death of what has been a central cultural figurehead of the British Isles for 70 years is indicative to me of a much greater problem. And I think that it has been a sign about how we should conduct ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that there should be anything like a kiddie table or we should, be pushing certain anime profiles to the side. Although I always get worried about anime profile pictures, not because I have a thing against anime, but there's that well known article that's out there about the FBI having a collection of anime like pictures for profiles. But what I'm trying to say is that our conduct must be mindful at all times, both on how our videos are done, how our essays are written, but also our outside behavior as well. I can say for a lot of the people that I've interacted with in real life and the people that I've streamed with on camera and things like that, they're more or less all upstanding people. I think that's more or less why they've stood to the test of time, or at the very least, they've been able to own up to past mistakes and have gotten themselves to where they are. And I think that that's an important aspect to it. And I think that that translates very nicely into the next point that I think is really worthwhile. Because one of the things that I've seen as of late in regards to mentorship, and I think I'm going to flesh this one out the most out of the 3 points, because I think everyone kind of knows the bare basics of don't act like an idiot, don't give away yourself, make sure that you're practicing basic OPSEC, and don't just try and get banned. Although if you do decide to get banned, if you decide to come back, if you tweet out "help me find my friends," Lord knows I'll retweet it. I always do. So keep that in mind. And as Narco Republican points out in chat, always behave as if your grandma could see or hear you. So that's a very good point. I would wholeheartedly agree. But this allows us, I think, to translate into mentorship. One of the points that I had made in my speech in February, which the event book is coming out soon, so hopefully I'll be able to publish the video of my speech as well. I think you guys will quite enjoy it. But as the subject of mentorship, this is something that I've seen happen in my short time being online and discussing things as well. And mentorship, I think, is very important. I will use some examples that I've come across on my channel and from other people's discussions that I think becomes a very vital point to this. Is that we of all people, I think, are in a position to offer wisdom and advice. One of the bigger videos in the last year that has really been sort of a wake-up call to really how bad things can get on a cultural level was Ryan Turnipseed's video, The Zoomers, which if you haven't watched it, I really do recommend that you go ahead and do it. I think after the stream, I will, what's the word I'm looking for? It is the, I'll link it after in the description, but it was just a sort of example of where Ryan Turnipseed lives, and he's made it clear that he lives in Oklahoma, and not in like Oklahoma City or anything, but like me, in a much more sort of rural, smaller part of the state, and sort of just to talk about and everything like that is, but in that point, he sort of illustrates just how bad things can be in terms of generations, and those that constantly try and seek out and find meaning over and over and over and over again. Often find themselves to be nothing more than a burnt out husk, whether that means going through several religions or political ideologies. We've seen it happen quite a few times. I wrote about it not last year, called Finding Meaning Among the Ruins, where individuals would post their political compasses, younger men in their early 20s and their late teens, talking about how they went from like the auth-right to lib-left to lib authoritarian on the red quadrant, and all the way back to libertarian again. And I think that it's certainly something that I think comes to mind, is that these people are looking for mentorship. We have to be very mindful, of course, of the parasocial relationship and the parasocial factors that come with it. It doesn't mean that we can't enjoy a little bit of the memes that go on. Lord knows that I think that they're quite enjoyable. And when people send me ones that they've made of me, it's also very funny. But I think when it comes to this, that there are many who are here for a long time. The Distributist has been here for quite some time. Millennial Woes has been here for quite some time. Frody has been here for quite some time. The list is exhaustive of people that have been here much longer than myself, or Turnip, or Charlemagne, and Charlemagne's been around much longer than I have, and that have a thing or two to say, because like the farmers insurance, they know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two, and their advice on how that they can conduct themselves is sort of important. It's one of the reasons why I sort of like the relationship that Ryan Turnipseed has with Stephen Carson, Radical Liberation, because it's a way to foster not only an understanding of economics, of American history. The two complement each other well, and in a way that that allows people to understand and have another outside figure, mainly patriarchal. That's what we really should be having these days. Is more men in our lives, not in a teacher or mentor or a patriarchal kind of way. For those of you who are, in a more high church tradition, that usually means having a spiritual father, your priest. Others, it can just be, the older man at your job, especially if you work in something like, electricity or mechanics or plumbing, whatever it may be. I've got everyone from white collar to blue collar to no collar happening here at all. And I think that means having a good eye for talent, a good eye for pro-social individuals, people that aren't going to snap at the slightest bit of criticism and find themselves dejected and move in such a way that they can do so. And this means that there will be a bit of gatekeeping when it comes to this mentorship. This means getting to know individuals and conducting what I think to be is some sort of political and psychological triage. This means that we have to take a look around ourselves and know that we're probably going to be with a very small network. And after all, when people say organization, they mean oligarchy. You do want a tight-knit circle that you can trust and rely on to organize and get things done. And I think that that's a big part about this, is how that we can mentor them. But not just on one-on-one relationships, but also this requires us to take a look and examine our relationships to individuals that are in our audience. The last video I had done, for example, was another fishing video, just sort of talking about the attention economy, how everything's sniping for our attention. And it had gotten some mixed feedback about, people that listen to things at 2 times speed, people that, understand that these spheres have a lot of content to consume all the time, and it's very hard to get to it. Or others, of course, were saying along the lines of, what, you're right. I'm not doing what I should be doing. It's important for us to stay mindful and attentive. I think it's St. John Chrysostom that says, do not relax. And we shouldn't be relaxing, or at least especially in these times, right? Not just because we can be tempted to do things that are stupid, but also because getting relaxed means that we kind of dull our intellectual and our physical blades as well in regards to, and I don't mean that in terms of weapons, I mean that in terms of our minds and what we do and what we believe and what we read, all those things that we need to have in terms of good, healthy, pro-social and pro-community behavior. Because there are times where I've gotten DMs on Twitter or comments or anything like that is, various people that have messaged me in private. I won't name names out of respect for them, but, questions regarding religion, about what I do, for like IRL living and thing like that, or communication skills. I've talked about it in the past that I did speech and debate in high school and college, and I've had people message me about, how to, be more social, how to have the confidence for social aspects. And I think of myself as a pretty regular person, so for those of you who have met me IRL, like, I'm not the world's most extroverted individual, but if you need me to turn on the light switch, I can definitely give you sort of a barn burning sermon if necessary. But it does require us, I think, to be able to express and set ourselves as good examples to others. Because, there's something that I did take away a year or so ago from Don the Pleb of all people, was that, people asking him about, electricity stuff, like how to take care of some faulty wiring or how to work on a truck or anything like that. And the thing was that you can offer all that advice, but at the end of the day, you can't be their dad. It's not something that you can do. You can't you can't be everyone's dad, which I think is certainly something that I think is worthwhile to understand. That doesn't mean, however, that we can't set examples in a pro-social way. I think that it would behoove me and others to talk about what we do in a very OPSEC friendly way, in regards to sort of our everyday lives and things like that. Not to get out anyone else's personal um, distractions or anything like that, but when people are like setting out for themselves, they're moving, they're starting to organize, and they're starting to put together what they want to do for future projects, whether it's IRL things or more events and things like that. In regards to conferences, I think that matters a lot in regards to mentorship and how we can set examples to people. And this is why actual real life community matters so much. This is why everyone I know in our spheres emphasizes the basket weaving aspect to this sort of community. Because if you can meet up with other like minded individuals and know that, hey, you're not alone, there are other people that actually think the way that you do, that actually listen to the content that you do, your life will go a lot further than you expect. I mean, just for example, not too long ago, I had my priest had referenced, he was reading a collection of essays from Wendell Berry, and the foreword of this one, I think, was "The World Eating Fire" was the book, and Paul Kingsnorth wrote the foreword for that book. And what kind of stood out to me though was that not too long ago I had a stream with the Franklin, and the Franklin was like, "Well, you should really interview Paul Kingsnorth." And so, really, there is a very thin veil that divides your real life and your online life if you try your best to keep them separate. And many of us do, because this isn't our full-time job. Not all of us get to do this. I know that like Academic Agent gets to do this full time, but I mean, he's done the work to earn that. But that just sort of shows you that the veil between the two is very, very thin in that regard, and I think that is something to definitely keep in mind. But there was a comment here in the chat that I wanted to point out on. But he says, to be honest, Prue, the only thing that can really beat the attack on attention span is some degree of self-induced spurgery. Potentially, as a person who goes on all sorts of bits of self-induced spurgery, I think that might actually attack my attention span more, because I do this a lot when I'm researching for either the Sunday stream or the research I'm doing for the book for the case for a foreign policy for the next regime. I'll read one JSTOR article, I'll go to the footnotes, and then I'll find something else, and then I lose it. And then that's the self-induced spurgery I go upon. But I think that in my case, at least for me personally, I think that the nature of, prayer and a lot of the aspects of what comes with the spiritual life has been a lot more of help for me to be self-disciplined. That way I'm not constantly having a million thoughts run in my mind all the time. I mean, that still happens. My brain runs at 1,000 miles an hour, but at least in a form or fashion that I can stay completely attentive without checking my phone or clicking on a new tab or anything like that. But, self-induced spurgery comes in all shapes, all forms. So I would definitely keep that in mind. But on that point, I do think that in regards to mentorship, we also must set ourselves to be examples, not only just to our audience, but also to ourselves. I mean, it becomes very easy to find out when someone is quote unquote LARPing, or when someone is simply, just putting in the legwork to reference the more popular people, and it doesn't really go further than that. I think that there is a lot of cacophony of self-repetition, and I think that it would behoove us to mentor newcomers and also people who are our betters and our colleagues. That way we can learn from one another and how to best move in that direction. As I mentioned in the comment section, the Distributist did a stream on his usual Tuesday, broadcast from Fiddler's Green, Tuesday evenings after UO. He had done a sort of a stream covering the Substack I did about being heard from sort of other, more establishment figures. And, he had mentioned this idea of the role of the educator, the role that certain people should be playing to not only educate the next generation of whoever comes next, but also those within more prominent levers of power that should do so. Which, I mean, for me, who's someone who has worked in sort of a non-profit community background, that means, the need to actually have people on the ground and to set an example on how to get people to care about the very things that matter to us. Because when you're trying to sell, a mission or an organization or an idea, The question that you do have to ask is the why question. The question as to why does this matter to me, or why should I care, or like why should I like not give you the bird and just walk away? And I think that that is a very good point to keep in mind. And so I don't consider myself to be an educator. I know that that might sound like an oxymoron because I do a show every Sunday to sort of talk about world events and international relations theory, but I think that that's kind of niche. But I think that there's a lot of us in this sphere that have things that go on and happen all the time. As I've mentioned before, I'm incredibly blessed by the fact that half of my audience is not American. Half of my audience is all over the globe, not just sort of the Anglosphere countries, but Europe, Africa, Asiatic nations, in the Middle East. I'm very blessed to get their feedback on things and to have people message me on what their take is, because I can't always view things solely based upon my own experiences. I do need to hear the feedback from others. And in the way that they can tell me their examples, I can have a more minded framework for how to operate in that form or fashion. And so I think that it makes us a way to have good communicators and interlocutors for what ideas we do want to get out there. And that also requires not just towards the establishment, but that also means to fellow individuals such as ourselves. You know, one of the things that was sort of my favorite meme a lot on sort of the dissident right or just on Twitter in general is the meme of "it's so over" and "we're so back." That never-ending cycle of despair and optimism and joy of coming back and understanding just, oh, we took an L, but we're gonna come back and we're gonna be like Rocky and we're gonna take the W and we're gonna win. And the reason why I think that that meme has a lot of staying power, dare I say it's Lindy, is that there's always fresh blood coming in. There's always someone taking their first red pill. There's always someone who's being recommended by a friend to listen or watch or share and take listen and heed to this video. I've had people that have commented on my channel saying, "Hey, someone sent me this link. Here's what I thought about it." So I mean, sharing and liking things does actually matter. I'm not saying that you should like and share the stream. You should. But simply the fact is that, if you think these people set good examples, then you should listen to them and that we should do so. And not just for me, but for everyone. This is why everywhere in these spheres, we always reference each other because they do set good examples. This is the reason why, for instance, the great service Skeptical Waves does for audiobooks and essays and things like that. He's mentioned every stream because everyone knows that service. Everyone needs that service. It's a good way to get access to sort of this canon of literature to understand where a lot of these guys are coming from that you listen to all the time. And that's a very vital and important thing. And so we are sort of setting up this network, this fraternity almost, not to denigrate any of the women that might be listening, although it's like 99.97% men. It's a bit of a sausage fest for politics, but that's for the best. But it does allow us to mentor and learn from each other and see the catalog of other people's work and to put it in such a direction that we can learn from things. That's why my favorite thing that AA does is the cigar stream, because it's usually heavily focused on one subject and I learn a ton. And so we have to learn from ourselves to be not only examples to each other. I think that it's important that we don't stay neats and unemployed and we just constantly consume, because then we just become the right-wing version of a bug man. And I think that's probably worse. I mean it in the U.S. American college way. I don't mean siblings or anything like that. I mean sort of a fraternal order, people that we can relate to and things like that. But that I think is one of the bigger parts that I think that we really do need to focus on. And so I'll get to the last bit here, and I'll sort of sum up all three of these points together, because there's definitely a lot of people that have inspired this aspect. But the last one is meaning and also movement. I think these words are interchangeable. Originally, I thought of the title of this stream while I was walking my dog. I was just thinking of alliteration. I was like, mentors, movements, and maturity or something like that. And I thought that was pretty good. But the last bit, of course, is meaning and movement. And I think that this is something that really does come to mind, because it's important to identify where you are in your life, what you are, and what you believe in or what you want out of your life. Everyone does ask the existential question, why am I here? Typically, there's an answer with that if you're a religious individual or believe in some form of vitalism. I'm not here to sort of light sparks or throw shade on anyone's religious beliefs. I know that I've got everyone from pagans to traditional Catholics that support me on Stripe Star, and I'm neither of those things. And so I'm also saying not to give yourself a label, but I think that it's very important, however, that you probably should have a label in mind or a list of core things that you believe in, because odds are if you get attacked by the establishment or by the left or blue check marks on Twitter or whatever have you, or even in your workplace, that they're going to give you a label anyway, and they're going to have their own preconceived notion of what that label means. I mean, we're seeing this now with the administration here in the U.S. going after ultra MAGA Republicans, or I think they're also focusing now on things like Christofascism, because you have the Andrew Torba, or yeah, Andrew, he is Andrew Torba, right? Yeah, Torba's, no, is it? I'm sorry, my mind is totally fried. I did not sleep much well today, so I've got coffee at 8 o'clock at night. But Torba's has his book out now for Christian nationalism. So, I mean, there's a million different camps for these things, and you're not always going to subscribe to everyone's ideas verbatim, which, I mean, is fine. That allows room for nuance and things like that, which is always good. However, just know that that will inevitably happen. There will come a day where someone calls you out, and things like that. So, with that being said, though, many of us do desire to do more. I think that a lot of us now are in a state of being where we can recognize, okay, a lot of the ideas that we've recognized, a lot of the things that we know, a lot of the things that has been discussed, whether it's from, the basic concepts of elite theory. I mean, thank God for AA putting out that book, The Populist Delusion, because it really is the ultimate Cliff Notes version of the a lot of the elite theorists, which is great. I mean, everyone from Schmidt to Juvenal to Pareto and Mosca are all there. I mean, fantastic, and you should read it. And in that point, it does illustrate that we kind of know what we are. We know what these things are going on. We know how the regime operates. We can have a pretty good gauge of what sort of crap is following our way. However, it's not always going to be perfect. Otherwise, we wouldn't constantly see sniping back and forth over the issues of lockdowns or the WEF and things like that. So, I mean, all that sort of stuff comes to mind as well. So, I mean, hey, we all have different camps, but we all know that we actually need to do something about it. I mean, there's that great Stone Toss comic where he's sort of making fun of Sargon, I think, in the old days, or it's just like the news anchor says, free speech officially banned by the government. And, he's like, not if I have anything to say about it. And he shows him clicking on his computer, uploading the latest SJW-owned compilation. And that meme is sort of that comic of a lot. I mean, all of Stone Toss's comics don't miss, but that one I think holds up a lot because we do have streams all the time about rank punditry and how to explain things, or having applications of ideas that apply to the current world or the current news headlines. And one of the things that I noticed about this that illustrates the need for these kind of introspective remarks, but also to be mindful that there are still people coming to this side of politics, is that the half of, like, I got quite a few comments not too long ago in the Bertrand de Juvenel and Bio-Leninism video I did a few weeks back, that was saying, why are we still talking about Bio-Leninism or high-low versus middle? This is such a 2015 or 2017 concept. And then there were other comments that were simply saying, wow, thank you for letting me know. I didn't know this idea before. I'm going to go look into it. So it does illustrate that we do have quite a few people that are coming in. And that means that these people are looking for meaning. These people are looking to find a movement or to find something that they identify with. And so you've heard me time and time again talk about localism. that you do have more power and you do have more influence with what's outside your window and what's right in front of you. And I think that that's a very important thing in concept to keep in mind, because the inability to have the pro-social attitude to go out, break bread with your neighbor if you're in a high trust society. If not, then find people that do. That's what basket weaving is for, and to start organizing around things that you believe in. When Academic Agent had James Kirkpatrick of VDare on, who is far more, who has far more been in this game longer than a lot of us have, he had made a point very clearly that I think should be reiterated here, which is, you can't make whatever movement or whatever organization or whatever sort of activism that you want to do, like, especially if you want to make communities, like, they can't just be explicitly political. Because, time and time again, we do see that. And then you see a lot of infighting over ideas. You see a lot of infighting over logistics or money or whatever. And then things kind of fall apart. You do need to have it oriented around the community. You definitely need to have it oriented around whatever you may believe in or your faith, which is why you do see a lot of us talk about the importance of religion in life. I mean, not just because by nature of being on the right wing, you are innately looking with a sense of teleology about living a life and what it means holistically and what comes after and what you want to leave behind from this world. Because, we're all innately, we're all innately aware of our own mortality. And so, I've had breaks of content these last couple of weeks, either because I'm engaging at real life events, or I'm simply taking care of my friend's, elderly mom and her dog while she's in the hospital. And I mean, she's in my parish. She's teaching me iconography. Like, I wouldn't be doing this if I weren't engaged in a religious community and held religious beliefs in a church that, I think is key to my salvation. And so, that's the other thing. It's about meaning. We have meaning in our lives. Yes, of course we do. Do we find it very easily? We should. I think so, at least on the right. Whether that's some kind of vitalism, or even if you're pagan, right? I mean, there are pagans out there that do have legitimate beliefs. Survive the Jive is a great example. I think Dave Martell and Mike from Imperium Press have articulated their beliefs quite well. Whatever you decide to believe in and whatever you decide to do, you do need to find your tribe. You do need to find the people that are out there and believe in the things that you do. And in order to get there in sort of a position to, get out there and to find people that are like-minded. And so many of us desire to do more work. And then the next thing about meaning that I think is the most important as we move on from here is the issue of the ever so foreboding question of now what. So, for instance, this is a question that will be asked much later down the line, and we've seen little bits of debates about this in regards to positive versus negative vision. But this is what I mean in this point here. A lot of us know that we are against the current, political project of modernity and the post-modernity that is soon to come to follow it. Many of us, I mean, all of us in here oppose the form of globalism. Many of us all oppose the form of, basically this sort of just globalized system that wishes to deprive you of sovereignty and, and the nature of these great secular sacraments of, zero energy or gender equity or diversity that, we're going to go full-blown egalitarianism to a point where, as Kovefe Anand on Twitter has said, the woke are more correct than the mainstream. And many of us want to have political projects. Many of us have called each other monarchists, and others like to have their various niche political ideas. Some are traditional Catholics that are integralists. Whatever you may have in your idea. The question I always think of when it comes to politics and the sort of positive vision aspect is the sort of like after credits scene of the ending of Finding Nemo, where they escape the dentist's office and they manage to roll across the street and they're in the ocean, but they're all stuck in their little plastic baggies. And he's like, great, now what? And that's something that I definitely think is very important here, is the question of, well, now what? Because, so for instance, if you manage to establish sort of this community, you start basket weaving, you start looking towards groups, you guys start an automotive club, or you start working with each other. That way you can trade food and supplies or whatever. I mean this especially for Europeans, because it really does look like that, by the beck and call of the American government, that Europe is literally going to freeze this winter unless they really decide to play this game of chicken and they blink. So, I mean, for those of you who live in Europe and in other parts with significant energy crises, Californians as well, that please be making sure that you can network with other people and, help each other out when need be, because you don't want to be caught on the side of the road in the winter and having to change a tire, or not having enough heat or enough food or water or anything like that. And I think that that's very important. And so that's definitely something that I think that will come to mind in the future. So that's something that I think is very important to look at, is these aspect of meaning, what we believe in. Many of us can do so in sort of a creedal type fashion. Others, however, I think also just sort of recognize that, oh, well, I just don't like those guys. It's the meme you see on a lot of 4chan green text. It's like, guys, I don't think I really have any politics besides just hating liberals. And, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And I mean, regardless of whatever the status of the war may be, the issue is that there's still going to be a lot of energy hardship and a lot of other consequences, I think, that have been openly prepared by the government. And I mean, even if you live in the United States, I mean, the Texas energy grid is not good. For the last 2 years, we have had significant winter freezes that have made things very difficult. I can remember when we first moved out here and I was on dialysis, that we had to run a generator just so my dialysis machine here at home would operate. So, I mean, you do need to keep these things in mind, and you do need to have a network and a sense of meaning, or a sense of organization and movement that can keep you sane and stable. And this is a part of, I think, the things that we need to work on in the future. So I think that, I think that everyone can sort of agree on the aspect of clear them out. I do think where a lot of the disagreement comes in is the method of how we're going to clear them out. And then secondly is well, now that we've cleared them out, how are we going to rule? Because if you don't have a plan to rule, or at the very least a plan to, survive when shit hits the fan, then that does put you in a very difficult position. And I don't have all the answers myself. I mean, that's sort of why I constantly keep reading and interacting and referencing other people, because they inspire me. Lord knows that I absolutely have to do that in the world, because if you had all the answers yourself, well, then you really should have already started a YouTube channel and started telling everyone else, because we'd like some answers. But that's something that comes to my mind here. So to wrap up this sort of laundry list of thoughts is that meaning and movements, they do need to have a political bent to it, but they also need to have sort of a teleological grounding and meaning for what they want to do. This means ideas on how to rule. And I mean, that doesn't mean it needs to be fully fleshed out. I mean, no, I don't expect anyone in here to be a complete polymath or Renaissance man who has economic policy figured out, foreign policy figured out. How are they going to deal with this place in the world? How are they going to deal with this place in their own locality? But it does require at least well-minded people to have pro-social attitudes and to speak to those who possibly can. Otherwise, we're definitely going to be up shit creek without a paddle, and then we're really going to be in trouble. So I really only intended for this talk to be for an hour, and then super chats and questions. So we'll get to the 3 points here that come out here. So I think the 3 big issues that I wanted to look at, and I know that I'm not the only one, and I wanted to sort of start this conversation because Lord knows I'm not perfect, and there are plenty of people that are sort of my betters and also my colleagues, and people that I've learned a lot from, which is that the right is in a really interesting space and place right now, where I think a lot of us are beginning to identify problems. And I thought that Charlemagne had probably one of the best points as of late. And, I'll quote Charlemagne once more, was that obviously we regard ourselves as normal, and that it is the vast majority of the people in our countries who have been propagandized and bullied into believing radically self-harming ideas that can be at the highest level described as egalitarian. Nevertheless, the broader public would see us as highly abnormal if they were to glimpse at us directly, which is why hiding your power level tends to be a social necessity. And it does, trust me. That being said, this is really only necessary due to the lack of respectability. To overcome this gap, the right needs to establish respectability, and I think self-discipline and mentorship. This is why maturity is the biggest points that we need to look at coming on from here. I think that a lot of the people that I've interacted with here have genuinely believed themselves. They're genuinely hardworking people. I mean, even if they're not the most well read, I definitely know they are very well intentioned and don't mean to come off like goofballs or jackasses. I wouldn't say that about anyone I've ever met IRL. I wouldn't say that about people like Oros, who wants to focus on land and focus on having actual technical skills when things get bad, especially as these complex systems, don't have the actual people to run them. I mean, bio-Leninism is on full display in Jackson, Mississippi right now with their water, because it just seems to be that when they, or tried to grift out billions of dollars from the U.S. federal government, all it took was just a bunch of, white guys with sort of like the Patriot T-shirts that you'd see at gas stations, make your water system work again. And I think that he's got a point here. Is that when we look good, when we pen authoritative pieces, I don't view myself either, like Charlemagne writes in his blog, as within high sphere of intellect or knowledge or creativity. But I think that what's most important now is that we have the ability to not just look at the world outside and say, oh, things really suck, but also look at ourselves on the inside internally and recognize where look at the fact that, hey, maybe we have some things to improve upon. So I think maturity is definitely one of the bigger things that comes out of that, especially for younger people that are looking for meaning. I'm 26, but I'm now coming to an age in my life where people are asking me for advice, and I think that's terrible. I have 2 liberal arts degrees. I can tell you what not to do. I can tell you a lot about what not to do, and maybe how to go through hell in order to find some transformative moment in your life where you can find meaning. Because that's more or less why I started doing this, is because I confronted death and I was like, oh, well, maybe I should get my shit together. And lo and behold, I have this YouTube channel, which I'm very blessed for its following and the supporters that I have with it. I have found the faith. I'm very thankful and blessed for that. So, but at the same time, I still have my moments of immaturity or my own spurgery that I definitely need to work on. Especially when, it's fun to be transgressive, but also important to know that you also serve an important purpose of, providing information, providing commentary and things to let people think about. And hopefully the stream does a little bit of that. The second thing, of course, is mentorship. Mentorship and maturity go hand in hand. We're going to have to rely on people older than us, both in our families, both in our workplaces, both within our colleagues and friends and hobbies, IRL, but also online to do so. One of my favorite things that I've seen really since the start of this year has been the series of streams that Radical Liberation has done with his wonderful wife, Heather, talking about marriage, intimacy, the sort of traditional lifestyle that they live, where they really do look like the model that we all should be emulating, even if it isn't impossible, or even if it isn't possible for all of us. It does indicate to us that, that's a lifestyle in a world that for many of us growing up these days don't have access to. But they do show us a good model, I think, in a lot of ways, in how to behave both on Twitter and online. One of the things that I really appreciate, that point of hiding your power level that I think Steven has done an excellent form of good practices on is that the things that he finds edgy or that he really likes, is that he will send them privately in a group chat to us all and just be like, well, I can't share this publicly, but I thought this was pretty funny or this was pretty good. Or share his more like, with less than, with some colorful language, and not to denigrate him or to disparage him, but just that I think that that's a very good example when it comes to maturity. Sometimes it can be very easy to just, pull the Burger King crown out from your drawer and start wearing it while you talk about things. And I think that stuff does definitely come on as well. But at the same time, mentorship also means that we as individuals in these spheres should be aware of the fact that we have a very large audience. I have, what is it now, over 7,000 people that follow me, and it blows my mind that that's the case. I mean, to have access and reach to thousands of people is more than, some professor at a university may ever have within, his publications or his books in his lifetime. And that's an insane thing to think about. Even the fact that you can have a video that has like 2,000 people that have viewed it and commented and things like that illustrates that we should be setting very good examples to people. I think that is, I know that sounds very soft-spoken and sort of obvious or kind of dumb or reiterative, but it does bear worth saying. Um, there's a reason why, come 2015, 2016, Jordan Peterson blew up the way that he did. Is just because people were trying to find a meaning in an incredibly despondent worldview and things like that. I do think that that's very important. So not only just it allows us to mentor those that we think have potential, but it also, in a very good form, allows us to have a mechanism of gatekeeping as well. That way we are keeping unlikable characters out, and at the same time we're also keeping the people that we like in, and that way we can help them with any sort of problem that they may have. Because, not everyone in these spheres grows up with two parents or grows up in these sort of middle or upper class lifestyles. Lord knows I do know that there are some in here, but I think that we do need to beat we really do need to beat the evil one with the temptation of existential nihilism. I think that, hell can't be made pretty, but the road to it sure can look attractive. And I think that that's why you do need mentors, to make sure that they don't go down that route. Not to say that you're indoctrinating them or to hurt them, but you can do a lot better. And I think that that's what we really want you to do. So if you do have a skill out there, if you're a mechanic or if you're a guy that knows how to do his taxes or whatever, like, you have skill sets that you can share to younger people, because a lot of people these days don't have father figures in their lives. And so if you can step up and be sort of a patriarch, please do. The world needs more male figures right now. And I think it's sort of the interesting thing now for this strange cultural moment that, Commonwealth countries and the British Empire is in right now, or with the British monarchy, is that, for the first time in almost a century, there's now a patriarchal head is what's going on. And, and as Argentum points out in the chat here, indoctrinating is only a thing when anyone else but, the gay does it. And I think that's very true. So last but not least on all these points, those two things, maturity and mentorship, help provide meaning in our lives and help provide us to understand what kind of movement that we want to be, both ideologically, but also politically on the ground. There was a point that Turnip had made a while back that I thought was very good from American Krogan, that, I might get in trouble from Susan for mentioning them on air, but, like what Patriotic Alternative does in the UK, with tea or community building and, putting out flyers and information, a lot more of that needs to happen here in America. And I know that has a much larger challenge because America's massive. The UK is about the size of the state of the Alabama in terms of square mileage. So it does require us to have local chapters of basket weaving in order to start thinking about how we get organized, in the same way that you also need to participate in local politics, go to city council meetings, actually complain to these people. Because boy, oh boy, the local officials do not like their ass can be held accountable and held to the fire, unlike really anybody else. Which means a lot. And also Americans, and I don't know how and I can only say Americans because I don't know about the rest of the world. A lot of Americans are politically illiterate. They focus a lot on what happens in Washington, maybe their state capital, maybe what their governor says, but they don't pay attention to things like their county commissioners. They don't pay attention to things like their city council that have a lot more leeway and a lot more power over them. And I think that that's very, very important. And so, that's something that I think also would behoove us to take an interest in with our own local communities. Like if you're in a higher trust environment, if you're in a more homogenous place, I think that would be a good idea to get involved with, after school programs and things like that. Because, even people that look like you, I mean, it's not like what it was 20, 30, 50 years ago, where people have two parents that one of them does stay at home and takes care of them. A lot of people work just to pay for childcare so they can get what they need to pay for childcare. And, if you can set a proper example then I think that comes one part in that regard as well. So to wrap up this discussion, we're about an hour into it. This little bit of introspection, I think, does illustrate some of the things that we need to work on: respectability, sociability, maturity, mentorship, taking people in under our wing, offering good advice. It was funny, I got a comment a while back saying, why do the Prudentialist and the distributist offer the worst relationship or dating advice? And then, well, Dave is married and a father, and I've already blocked the block and been around. I wrote a whole article about that. I tried some of the PUA style tips, and it's not for me, so maybe that's why. But I think those things will help us provide meaning and provide us a better opportunity to have more effective political movements in our lives if they are rooted and grounded in founding principles and a positive vision. That way, if we do get the chance to clear them out, or we do have a chance to have our own institutions to do what we need to do, then by Jove, we'll have the kind of people that we need to do it. So that's my talk. Thank you all so much for tuning in and things like that. I know this was rather impromptu, but a lot of you were kind enough to send some super chats. So I'm going to just start from the very top and load them in. That way I can have them on screen, because some of you had some very insightful things to say, because I can see it over here to the right on StreamYards. I just want to get us started. So we'll start now with the first one once I can pull it up and find it. But yeah, let's scrolling. There we go. Zed Des for $25 Canadian. He says, cheers, Prudentialist. Well, thank you, Zed Des. I've seen you around in a lot of chats and other places. Greatly appreciate it, and I am very thankful for it. This isn't a super chat, but I just can't help but laugh at this. I'm 26. He looks like he's 35. Oh, if you meet me in IRL, it's more like I look 18. That's kind of why I have the mustache going. But, I'm soon to be 27 this December. Let's see here. The next one, scrolling down, was from Cringewalker, $5 US. It's crazy to think that most of the Anglosphere has not had a patriarch as the head of state for nearly the entirety of modernity. Hopefully it nudges some out. Well, it's not that the royal family is perfect by any way, shape, or form. I think that there's plenty of stuff that can indicate that. But I know a lot of people were sharing that video of now King Charles III, back when he was the prince, of him talking about, what was it, Rene Guénon, right? And sort of those questions of the traditionalists versus modernity, which I think has a lot of people's attention as well, which is very good to keep in mind. But I do hope that the idea of having an actual patriarch, not just as a head of state, but for more of us in our lives, we need to have more patriarchs. It's one of the big BAP memes is about the longhouse and sort of this rule of feminine gossip that constantly emasculates men. I think that that's a big portion of what we need to do is to escape that in some form or fashion. That means we do need men, or to borrow a much older sort of, European term, a kurios or something like that, where men can be men and to establish what they need to do outside of those sort of civilizations. Let's see here. The next one was from Merrick for $20 US. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. The first few red pills create righteous of the new convert, and individuals tend to act out. But over time, people should learn to have a healthier frame. A sign of growth may be managing the problem of our righteous converts. Yeah, Merrick. I mean, this is something that you see on Twitter all the time, whether it's Catholic, Ortho, or even various forms of Protestant Twitter. Is that you have what's called the stage cage. Recent converts that it's the zealotry of the convert, where you really do want to proclaim how pious and faithful you are, and why your doctrinal ideas are correct, why your theology and soteriology is correct. And I really hope that when I get baptized that I don't have that. Just partially why I try my best not to talk too much about my faith and what I'm going through right now, because I don't want to be that kind of guy. But I think that that's very true, and I think that only reinforces the point for mentorship. Is that, a lot of young guys do get really rambunctious and insane when they start really ingesting these red pills. They may be ingesting them a little quicker than they should. That way, it's sensory overload where you think that you see everything, and, you can see demons in your mayonnaise or certain ethnic groups in your bread. And so all of a sudden, I think that's where the mentors and the patriarch should step in and be like, okay, son, come here, come here. Let's talk about these things, right? Let's temper you in such a way that you're not getting banned on Twitter, or you're having your YouTube channel or your Twitter or your blog being broadcasted on the university on the first day, like our friend Ace from Epic Loud Center had on his. He talked about that the other day in chat, which I thought was pretty funny. Let's see here. The next one was from one of my favorite gimmick super chatters that comes around. I know that he's done this a few times with AA and Oren McIntyre. There we go. Let's see here. Scrotchy McDumpwaffle for $2 US. I just like hearing people say my name. Well, Mr. Scrotchy McDumpwaffle, I have said your name twice now, so enjoy. Thank you so much. Let's see here. I think the last one actually was in support of him as well. So, nope. Cringe Walker for $5 US says, a local Christian elder once taught me, he who calls his fathers fools proves his lineage. It's something I use to measure minds to this day. Well, yeah, I think this is the big thing that we see when it comes to one of the criticisms that Panama Hat had in regards to his concern about postmodern conservatism is that, a lot of postmodernism is meant to criticize and to deconstruct the grand narratives of modernity and the history and the narratives and culture, ethnicity and language. Watery and Deleuze calls this, deterritorialization and reterritorialization. And so, he who calls, his fathers fools proves his lineage, which I think is a good piece of advice, because we shouldn't be calling the past fools. So we should learn from them, because odds are we're a fool ourselves. I mean, yes, there are things that clearly previous generations have done wrong. Boomers hate is quite common, and there's valid critiques for that. But at the same time, to call what got you here as an individual, it also comes to my mind as well. But yeah, I mean, let's not prove ourselves to be the same kind of fools that don't look back and recognize what was right and what was wrong. Let's see here. Reprobus Official, $5 US says, how much space do you think artists have for transgression? I think art, at least for whatever the art right or just right wingers that want to make art, like Geo, or I know that you're working on music as well, or all the guys from various poetry groups or White Art Collective or whatever. I think they have a lot more room to be transgressive, because I think for anyone that wants to be transgressive these days and to have their messaging heard in such a fashion is going to be innately transgressive against sort of the established Overton window. So I think artists have a lot more room for that. And I mean, if you want to really see some other just mainstream forms of transgression, Mr. Patriarch on his channel, he had 2 streams, one with Oren McIntyre, one with Brother Augustine, who's a Orthodox Christian YouTuber. They were talking about Christian and reactionary themes in metal and in rock, which, I mean, there's a lot of, I believe it or not, there's a lot of Orthodox metal bands out there and a lot of Orthodox rock bands, which, I mean, talk about the gospel is pretty transgressive in these days as it is. So I think that artistry has a lot more room for transgression. And as we've noticed with artists, whether they're writing fiction or making music or poetry or short films, by nature of their existence is already pretty transgressive and rebellious. So I think artists do have a lot more room for it. So I hope that does answer your question. Let's see here. Minoan for $5 US says, say Scrotchy McDumpwaffles again. Well, I've said it again, so I hope that you enjoy. But yeah, I think that is all of the super chats. But see here what's going on in chat for a few minutes. Let's see here. Talking about, various jobs that people have and things like working in, reactors and being engineers. This space has a lot of engineers, which I think does explain quite a bit of the thought process of, how we think a lot. I think that there was this, I don't know who mentioned it on Twitter, but someone was just talking about how the engineer mindset is a big role for, the engineer mindset in Silicon Valley has kind of made things a lot more easier for basically LGBT stuff to be mediated through computer communication. which, odds are it's probably true. It's the same reason why, as a software engineer, a software developer, I think that's the reason why Curtis Yarvin has a lot of the takes that he does, is that he does view things and sort of these forms of fashion and things like that. Um, so it definitely does keep in mind. Let's see here. Khalifa K says Saxon makes deeply Christian songs. Well, I'm going to have to look them up. That's probably true. But good to know. But yeah. And Scroshy McDumpwaffle, I've said your name more times than I thought I would be tonight, but he says, I think my goal is to go full worm tongue on some local millionaire that funds the local Republican Party and try to get some reactionary seeds planted. And this is sort of some conversations I've had in the back is that you need someone. There's a Twitter account called Conley Derpkra or something like that. If you've seen him, you'll know that he does all these great parodies and things like that. And he was talking about this thread of what the E-right on Twitter is. And he had this whole section called the Boomer Whisperer, which Orrin McIntyre's Don't Make Me Tap the Sign meme was on there, which I think out of every one of these spheres, Orrin McIntyre is the most successful in communicating these ideas to the boomers in a palatable way to where, even he can tell these people, look, if you don't, if you keep calling them racists and accepting their frame, which is innately anti-white, you're going to keep losing. It's the same thing about calling them hypocrites. So, I mean, you do need salespeople. This sphere, these politics need effective and respectable and pro-social salespeople that can make these ideas palatable to the audience that we want. This is the big point that Charlemagne called, and it's his Substack piece called "The Real Dilemma of the Dissident Right." I will share it in the comments here so you can all see it. But yeah, no, I mean those are very good ideas to keep in mind because we do need sort of pro-social movements and things like that. And yeah, that's another good example. For anyone who's into zines, Death to the World is probably a very example of transgressive art done right. And that's very correct in that regard as well. So I think that that's very true. In the same way that I think that even for me, like I enjoy what my friend Stained Haynes does with Cars and Women magazine. They do get a lot of other writers published. T.R. Hudson is going to have one of his stories published there as well. And I like what they do as well. And they're not explicitly conservative. I think they're pretty funny and transgressive in a lot of ways. And they're not explicitly political, but anyone that is just, talking about, if your politics on this one issue, I can guess everything else, which makes you a pretty annoying sort of like shit lib. Like it's good to have. But yeah, Death to the World was an excellent example. So yeah, I mean, those are things that I think we all really need to keep in mind in that regard. Terminal Philosophy says, great stream. Well, thank you so much. I haven't caught up with today's Praise of Folly roundtable. I know that he's covering the same article I'm covering this Sunday, so I should probably give it a watch this weekend before I go live Sunday afternoon. But yeah, no, I mean, there's quite a bit of stuff going on here that I think is very important for us to take a look at and keep in mind. I'll probably wrap up here in the next few minutes, but I did want to go through some of these, some of your guys' comments throughout the stream, because I think some of them were very good in that regard. But because, I'm always going to go through the things that I, for those with super chats, but I mean, there are plenty of other people definitely go on there. So let's see here. But overall, I just think that this little bit of introspection, like I really do look forward to the comment section, in this video and what other people have to say, because I'm, if everyone else is writing about this, and I mean, Radical Liberation had a great post on his Telegram linking to various people that are saying that we want to grow up. That was another thing that had inspired today's discussion and stream, was that, I think a lot of us do want to try and avoid that nature of this being nothing more but escapism or the friendship simulator, which I think is definitely very important in that regard. And I think that that's really the big issues here, is that we do want to be in that regard just individuals that are supportive. Prude is talking about maturity, and I seem to have very little. I don't know why I'm a mod. Last I checked, Minoan, you were a supporter, so by nature of that, you got the wrench. So that's kind of how it works. Is if I identify you by being a supporter in some form or fashion, that's what I'm going to do. But I think that happens in regards to what's the word I'm looking for? I really do think that what will come from out of all of this is going to be the nature of, well, I think that there's already a pretty well established community. This doesn't mean that there isn't room for newcomers and things like that. For instance, I really like the conversations and interviews that Jay Burden does, because it does give you a nice way to um, understand people and where they come from. For instance, and it's also a great way to get to know people in different forms of fashion. Like he's interviewed me, he's interviewed Pete Quinones, he's had Thomas777 on. He most recently had my one of my like more favorite Scandinavians outside of Frode. He had a Walrus on, or Walrus in a suit, as he's known on Twitter. I just like to call him Walrus. I love his thumbnails. I think that they're great. But he also does. I think he's definitely one of my favorites here in that regard. But I think that's more or less all that I really had to say. I'm very thankful for all of you to tune in. These were just some thoughts that I had, very impromptu. It all fit on one sheet of paper. But those were things that I had in mind. But I will let you all see this real quick. Apparently, on American Populist channel, he's going to have a part 2 with Thomas777 on the nature of the civil rights regime. So by all means, be sure to tune in and keep your eyes on that. As for me, I will see you all on Sunday, but I will have a Substack article on some foreign policy news that I've been seeing, and that will be for paid subscribers and Subscribe Star backers as well. I'm also on buymeacoffee.com now. You can just find me at buymeacoffee.com/the Prudentialist. I know that there are other ways to do it. Once I get a different setup for streaming with my computer, I will use Entropy. I will do all that more often with OBS and things like that, and learn how to make it work. So all that sort of stuff will come in the future. But I do have a lot more announcements to come as well. So that will happen very soon, as always, with the announcements at the end on Sunday's stream. So with that, I wish you all a very pleasant evening, a very pleasant good night, and I will see you all next time. Take care and God bless.